By the way, before launching into the episode, I figured I'd give you a heads up. We're probably going to talk about...
But we can't say that at the beginning of the episode.
No,
Gasp.
no. I was just giving Riley the heads up so that he later when we do bring it up.
We are covering title redacted at the beginning of this podcast.
You should have it go every time we say the actual words, but leave all that in.
Okay. I'll use that specific
use that bleep sound.
Shh. I'll use that specific soundbite.
Shh.
Because there's this book series I'm reading right now, the Stormlight Archive, where one of the important characters can't remember his wife's name or anything about her because she's dead. But yeah, so whenever her name is said, it's written out. Shh.
It's kind of like how some scholars believe Yahweh is just like an abbreviation that the Hebrews use because they couldn't actually write down.
Oh, it definitely is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that.
That one's not debated.
And they invoke the name of the Lord. Shh. Basically.
YHWH.
Yeah.
Well, they would say Adonai when they saw that.
Oh, okay.
Because the Hebrew's weird. Just long story short, Hebrew's weird.
Uh-huh.
And it was like the same consonants, but different vowels, which are marked differently in Hebrew. So don't ask me how it works. I'm not a Hebrew expert. Like, find someone who is, but like, yeah, they would read it Adonai.
It'd be like that bit from Life of Brian, where like this random old dude says Jehovah, and so he's about to get stoned for saying Jehovah, but then they're like, "What did he do wrong anyway?" And the guy in charge is like, "He said Jehovah," and then they start stoning him for blaspheming. Life of Brian was weird. There were some bits in there that were pretty funny, but then it was also like, huh? What?
Always look on the bright
Side of life. Gosh. I did like that bit at the beginning where the three wise men show up to Brian's house to give him the gifts, and then they like walk outside, realize they're in the wrong place, come and grab everything back and take it over to the real manger scene down the street.
Speaking of older languages being weird, a couple things back I wanted to transition, but you went to Life of Brian.
Oh.
No, so how is your Latin, Riley?
Not outstanding, but I like in terms of being able to read it, I can almost always parse out a meaning.
Sure, but translation-wise, you're not so hot, so?
I can do it with a dictionary and like, yeah, but
Sure.
I couldn't just
Sight
I
read it.
can't speak or anything like that.
No, nobody does. It's aside
some people
from mass
can.
parts. My point being, I got a message from my oldest sister, whose husband is in a band, who's writing music, and they're like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had some Latin lyrics here?" And
It's metal.
she texted me like, "Hey, how's your Latin?" And I'm like, "Well, I have a seminarian friend. I could send it to him." So
I've done translations like for our Latin class. We had to do stuff. It was mostly Latin to English rather than English to Latin.
Sure. But would you mind if after the podcast I text it to you, see what you can do, and then...
Sure. That might be a interesting project for Silent Retreat that I'll be on next week.
Because it's it's sort of a medieval vibe, I guess, to his metal band that they have going.
Yeah. Haven't heard a whole bunch of stuff. I'm a bad brother-in-law, I guess, but...
I mean, I don't look at every house my brother-in-law builds.
You ought to. You should feel
Just show
ashamed.
up.
I should... See, I'm a bad brother-in-law for not showing up to every lesson your sister teaches to her, like, what, fifth graders?
She works in the library.
Oh, yeah.
now, I
But she
believe.
has, like, a class in the library she does sometimes.
Yeah. So, you're just bad for not showing up to story hour, and then I'm bad for not showing up when Andrew's helping clients at the credit union.
Yeah, you should go join a credit union.
Yeah,
and
just to shadow.
sign up through him.
No, not join a credit union. Just show
Be
up
there.
when Andrew's working with a client.
Precisely.
Yes,
I'm his brother. I'm his brother-in-law. And what does that have to do with us? I'm
Absolutely
his
not.
brother-in-law.
Everything, duh.
I'm here to support him in all of everything he does.
I'm his support-in-law. It's like a support dog, like a. It's like, yes, I brought my brother-in-law around, as is the custom. Who's custom? It's a custom. It's
Somewhere.
custom to me.
I had a bit of a weird day today.
Did you know?
Yes. So as people know, I work at an untitled package shipper company, and I showed up this morning, and the plane was late.
Untitled package shipping. I like that.
Thank you.
It just
Thank you.
occurred to me.
You guys know mine.
I know yours. Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the plane was very late. Like 11:30 when I showed up at 5:50 late. So I was in. I mean, I didn't have anything else going on today, so which is fine. But I just sat in there for a long time, and they had ordered like a half dozen of Casey's like breakfast pizzas when there was only like a
Nice.
half dozen people there,
So you each had an entire breakfast pizza,
more or less.
or was interesting?
Which it's like, I guess that's just the batch number they usually buy it in for just when there's late planes, but there's
Yeah.
like maybe a dozen of us there, so like 10, 12 breakfast pizzas. It's like that's a lot, and so I ate a lot. I didn't have, which is why I didn't eat the leftovers from last night.
Oh, okay.
Because of the whole diet thing. Of course, I'm not like actively participating the way you and Bryant are. I'm just along
Yeah.
for the ride.
Yeah. So you'll like sort of get some of the residual effects theoretically.
Some.
But cool.
So that was just. I came home at noon
Nice.
after going to work at 5:40.
Oh dang, yeah, that is for considering how long you're usually at work, that is a pretty long day.
It is. Hey, I got paid to wait for like 4 hours.
Did it come?
Oh, it showed up.
Okay.
And we got a couple of cans off there, and it was this whole thing.
It's like all of this waiting for that. Like were the people from the next shift like starting?
No, they don't start until like maybe 4. I don't know.
So it's like late afternoon.
Yeah, it's late afternoon. They go like really late, which is why I didn't sign up for the late shift because
Right.
I don't operate at those
No.
hours.
Good call.
So that's my funny story for today.
So Nathan mentioned that our roommate and I are trying to do this like diet, which isn't so much like a diet as like calorie counting, that type of thing.
That is what a diet is.
That's what
Right, but
diet
I'm saying not like keto or like Whole30 or anything like that. Just
Well,
like
There are different
think
varieties
what
of
people
diet.
Right, but when people say diet, they mean I'm eating less
Yeah.
with the intent of losing weight.
So I guess for the in the colloquial sense, yeah, we're dieting. So it's like we're both doing it as sort of an accountability thing, and he's been doing all the math on the macros and everything. But of course, like, what is this, like day 2 or 3 of this? And so it's summertime. There are a few administrators in the building at work, including me, and people are still dropping off leftovers. Like there are like however many, like 20, 30 teachers in the building. And so there's just like these boxes of like Danishes, banana muffins, freaking. There was these lemon poppy seed muffins. Now, it may come as a surprise, but not a surprise, but like, I'm a lemon poppy seed muffin guy.
Lemon poppy seed is good cake.
It is so freaking good. But I had already like, reached my breakfast allotment because I ate one of the Danishes for breakfast, and that's because it was a weird morning. I routine was off anyway, and so I was just like this, and then there's like this pumpkin bread with like chocolate chip, all this good stuff on the break room table. It's like, why now? Why now, Lord?
Because it's the end of the school year, and that's
well,
when
school year's over. There's nobody here, so the stuff is just going to sit there until it goes bad because I can't eat it. Nobody else is eating it. It's just sitting there staring at me whenever I go refill my water bottle. So I think I might need to start refilling my water bottle in the workroom instead of the break room because there's another water cooler in there because it's just too much.
you could also just not eat breakfast before going to work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I usually do like my like a protein shake.
Right.
And that's my breakfast. But yeah, it's just rough times. I was thinking to myself yesterday, Lent is actually easier because it's a religious exercise. I could make this a religious exercise, but like we're still like Easter season. It's Pentecost. I suppose the day before this episode goes out. I believe it. Yeah. Pentecost coming up. So there's still sort of that joyfulness. So I can't really go into like this whole ascetic mood when we're supposed to be rejoicing in the resurrection. But man, it's fun. I'm making a big deal out of it being dramatic, but I'm very bored at work. So these are the now because there's a lot less to do. Like there's nothing.
Making big deals out of the sweets in the break room is just what you do because you have nothing to do.
I also think that like how much of a struggle this is for me is funny. So that's why I'm not really complaining. I'm just sort of like making fun of myself, more or less.
Inwardly directed Schadenfreude.
Yeah. I'm so lonely. No. Oh, man. That and getting bombarded apparently by just all sorts of gross billboards on my way to work. It's just like, what happened? What happened to my peaceful drive to work? Why must these thinly veiled innuendos be hurled at my pure Christian eyes as I drive into my good boy Catholic school's job where I do things on the internet, the pure Catholic internet. Anyway, it's been a day. We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
Speaking of pure Catholic boys, I got the transition wrong.
Are you okay?
I will be.
What
are we talking about today?
I was just gonna say we did the whole Winnie banter part, but we never once brought up the pillow fort he's audibly built.
Oh yeah, Riley has audibly built a blanket fort around the microphone as a sort of makeshift sound booth.
Indeed. I have several convenient points on which to hang said blanket. The way this setup is right now, I have my microphone clamped to the shelf behind me, like or rather like behind the computer in front of me. So it's like the pole that holds the mic, it provides one point, and then the microwave over there provides another point. So
you have a microwave in your dorm?
Yes.
That's
and a
kinda
fridge
handy.
and a freezer.
Think of all. I suppose is it supposed to be like an isolation in the?
No, but
in the
it's like
silent retreat.
no, definitely not. And they have like fridges, full size ones on the hall.
Ah,
But it's just kind of
a
the
convenience
university has them for the students during the year.
thing. I see. And it's being used as a retreat center during the. Yeah, Riley's in Omaha, guys.
Yeah, he's no longer
and
here.
I feel like we didn't mention that.
There are some things that I figured should be communicated before we transition to the part where we talk about our philosophical on the 1999 film The Iron Giant.
Yep.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Philosophical.
And speaking of old movies, after this, I'm heading straight to a showing of Top Gun Maverick with some people. So
I gave you a place to slot in the philosophical bumper
Well, consider it.
Of course, we broke the whole flow anyway.
Yeah, it's been a day.
Just insert it somewhere randomly in this conversation. Perhaps like even in the middle of my sentence here.
Premium.
Anyway.
Yes, it's a philosophical today.
The part where we get philosophical about films.
Mm-hmm. So Iron Giant. Tell us about Iron Giant, Nathan.
Well, it released in 1999, was directed by Brad Bird, is an animated film by Warner Brothers Animation.
Brad Beard.
And I had never seen it until last week.
Brad Bird of The Incredibles and
Well,
there's a few other movies.
he did
made.
Ratatouille and Incredibles, but
yeah.
When he did those, he was
after
Brad
this.
Bird of Iron Giant fame.
Yeah. Yep. This was one of his earlier movies, as I understand it.
Yes. So, our film begins somewhere in Maine, off the
Northeast.
coast. You've got there's a storm, and there's a fisherman coming in home from the storm.
Modern day 1957.
Yes. Which is very important to the whole theming and such.
Aesthetic.
So he's pulling his little, probably fishing boat into port when something very large falls out of the sky, like a meteor hits the ground, it crashes into the water, which, sends his boat reeling because splash waves and such.
Mm-hmm. And it's in the middle of like a nasty gale.
Indeed. And so he's on his way trying to find his way to the lighthouse, and after the crash, he sees what he thinks is the lighthouse, but turns out to be a pair of gigantic glowing eyes that he crashes into a giant metal man.
Mm-hmm.
He falls overboard and washes up on the shore, and that's all we know of that. We are then introduced to our main character, Hogarth Hughes, who is a kid. He's just a kid. It's summertime. He doesn't have school currently. His mom works at
There's 104 days of summer vacation.
And school comes along just to end it.
And my mom, Jennifer Aniston, is, working at the cafe, so I got to find good ways to spend it.
Right.
Like
And one of the
maybe-
things he does is he just likes taking in wild animals and being like, Mom, can we keep them? And the answer is usually no, because they're wild animals and make a mess. Like he accidentally does in the cafe this morning when he's like, hey, Mom, I have a squirrel. Can we keep him? She's like, no, where is he? And he's like, oh, he got out of the box, and he's causing a ruckus because he crawled up some guy's leg.
S-I-M-P squirrels in my pants.
Yeah, speaking of Phineas and Ferb references, 15, 20 years before Phineas and Ferb came out. Or no, about 10, 30, 50. Well, okay, not important.
The important bit is that while we're in the diner, the old fisherman who was on the boat is there telling his big fish story. It was 100 stories high. It was in the water, and I crashed into it. I had to fight for my life. Nobody believes him, right? Because
But there's this guy named Dean.
Yeah, there's this other guy named Dean who's like, sure, I believe you. Got to back you up somehow. Like, he doesn't actually believe him. He just kind of wants to validate him.
Somebody's got to stand up for the crazies in this world.
Right. Dean is this he's a
He runs-
artist of sorts
Yeah.
who also owns a junk shop and uses the junk shop
He's a bit of a beatnik.
to find parts to make his weird late 50s, early 60s modern art stuff.
Bit of a beatnik.
Yes. So that's kind of what's happening during the day. There's
Hogarth's kind of a latchkey kid. It's sort of, if you kind of read the clues throughout the movie, it's kind of clear that at some point, like, his dad was like a pilot, maybe in a war or something, because this would have been like after the Korean War,
right.
so could have potentially died. But long story short, his dad's not in the picture, and it's just his mom raising him. So she has to work late at the diner one night, so she sends Hogarth home by himself.
It's like, hey, food's in the fridge, stuff like that.
No junk food and no scary movies.
Which he proceeds to immediately indulge in both junk food and scary movies far too late at night. At around the same time that there's a power outage, which him having just watched a scary monster movie and being hyped up on sugar is a little freaked out by, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to go confront this. He goes up to his room, grabs an old pilot helmet that's very well...
And a flight jacket.
And a flight jacket. A little old BB gun with his name, carved onto it. And he tapes a flashlight to it and goes out into the woods, following gigantic footsteps of something that bit the TV antenna off of his house.
Mm-hmm.
And so as he's going into the woods, he's following this trail. He comes to like a electrical power
snapped in
station.
half trees, like all these signs of something very big has been moving through the forest.
Very large. So we get to this electrical station, like a bunch of transformer boxes in the middle of the power line, kind of a thing. And it's there that we see the Iron Giant for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He's this, 50-foot tall metal
He's
man.
iron and
Giant.
He's giant.
He looks exactly like Vin Diesel.
Yes. So anyway, this Iron Giant begins to take bites out of the electrical equipment because he eats metal, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets kind of tangled up in the electrical cables, and they start shocking him, which is not cool because he's conductive. And Hogarth takes this opportunity to run, but he then looks back and sees, that it's a creature in pain. He's like, well, I'm going to, before I run away, use the gigantic on-off switch that's out in the open and totally a thing that these power stations have, and turn off the power, and then run.
Yep.
So he saves the Iron Giant and dives back into his house. After his mom came home, she's been worried sick and been driving her car around trying to find him. And it's like, you can't just do that on me, kid.
He starts telling her a wild story about this big giant, and she just thinks he's rambling.
Not having it because, not now. She's worried. She's a mom.
Very tired.
Very tired, and he's always going off like this about something.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so while this is happening, because it's a giant monster that eats metal, and it's a rural, town in Maine somewhere.
Yeah,
there's
which
I'm
assuming is made up, but
yeah, probably. But there's farm equipment with huge bites taken out of it and pieces of the road, people's cars and stuff. Just like
a crazy old fisherman had made a call to Washington. Yep, they're sending a man down to look at it.
And they sent a man down to look at it.
The U.S. Department of Unexplained Phenomena or something like that.
A made-up department that totally exists. You're not supposed to know it exists, but it does.
Yep, and all that implies. What was his name? Like Agent Kent something?
I'm currently doing the...
Kent was his first name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember his surname.
Trying to... Which link brings me to
the cast. Oh,
anyway.
I'll see if
shows up to investigate. He starts interviewing the farmers.
Kent Mansley.
Mansley. That's who it is. Mansley. Starts investigating the damage at the power station, all these bite marks out of tractors, things here and there. And he's
he's
kind of a hot shot.
Kind of out to prove himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like a very, since the 1950s, we're in the heat of the Cold War, which is...
rather heightened state of paranoia.
So everybody's like, oh, is it something the commies launched over here? Is it,
Yep, we got to find out if it's a threat and destroy it before it becomes one.
So that's very much Mansley's
MO
thing here. Whereas Hogarth is like, well, I'm gonna find it again. I'm gonna take a picture. So he sets a stake out. He grabs a old piece of sheet metal, grabs his camera, sets up bait to try and snap a picture of the thing. And it takes a long time, to the point where he dozes off and takes a nap and wakes up, and there it is.
Mm-hmm.
He freaks out and runs away. There's a bit of a scuffle while the Iron Giant chases him, but eventually he's like, "Wait a minute, you're not actually mean, are you?
Mm-hmm.
You're just kind of."
I think he throws down the broken switch as
a sign of
acknowledging, hey, you saved me.
So it's like, hey, I'm gonna teach you a few words. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's kind of intelligent. It's talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is or where it came from. There's a big dent on its head, so I don't know what that's about. It must have got hurt when he landed. But hey, this is cool. I've got my own Iron Giant friend. He tells him to stay and not follow him. He's like, okay, it's late. I'm going to go home. You can't come home with me. Stay here. But the giant doesn't understand. It just kind of follows him. It's like, okay,
I'm going to hide him in the barn.
Hide you in the barn. And
the government guy's sort of snooping around looking for him.
Yeah, he's snooping around looking for evidence of the giant.
Comes across a broken BB gun.
He does.
In the
Puts that
woods.
in his car for later. Yeah, it's got hug written on it. But he's at the power station investigating. It's like, well, who nearby would have seen it? And they're like, well, there's a house over there. You can go talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes down and knocks on their door during dinner time. And Hogarth answers the door, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Kent Mansley. I'm from the government." And he shuts the door on his face because there's a hand from the Iron Giant loose in the house,
yeah, I think
causing some ruckus.
Like the giant had like tried to eat the railroad tracks, and Hogarth was trying to get him to put it back together. In the process, like he gets hit by the train and causes a derailment. So there's pieces of the Iron Giant that have been scattered all over the place.
And that's the scene that Mansley was coming from.
Mm-hmm. He was investigating the train crash.
That's what it was.
Yep.
So yeah, the Iron Giant's in pieces, but he can kind of call them together to reassemble him, but his hand kind of got lost in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hogarth is comedically trying to
get the
hand out of the house while not letting anyone see it.
Mm-hmm.
And now the government guy's there. He's borrowing their phone to make a call to headquarters, and headquarters is like, if you don't have like physical proof of this thing, if you don't have more than a hunch or a good feeling about this, we're not going to send the army down there.
Mm-hmm.
I can send the army if you get me a cast of its footprint or a picture of it. I don't care what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this frustrates him because he wants to be the big hot shot that discovers a thing and then blows it up.
Yep.
So after leaving the house, he's had a bit of
Hogarth? What kind of a name is Hogarth? Wait a minute. Hug. Hogarth Hughes.
Turns out that Hogarth Hughes is pretty much the only name you could come up with that has hug as their first thing, because the part where his BB gun snapped broke off the second half of his name. So he comes immediately back and he's like, "Hi,
this kid's my lead. I see you guys are renting out a room. I would like to rent it."
And this displeases Hogarth quite a lot because he's like, "No, I want to have a secret Iron Giant friend, and I don't want you to know about him."
Mm-hmm.
And so the entire, later that night, before we find out he rented a room, Hogarth comes up with a spot where he can put the giant. Because like, well, if I let you out, you're going to eat everybody's metal things. I need to put you someplace where you can be fed and not seen. I know a guy who owns a junkyard.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go up there. And so he goes up to Dean's junkyard and is like, "Hi, Dean, don't look outside right now. I want to talk to you about things."
Mm-hmm.
And Dean's a decent guy. He's like, "Okay, I'll hear you out. I'll talk to you." Then he hears something loud outside. He scurries out and sees the giant. He's like, "It's a 50-foot thing. I'm going to get the shotgun." He's like, No, don't. Please, can you let him stay? He's basically a child at heart. Come on.
Mm-hmm. And Dean's like, "Okay, this is crazy, but all right.
It's weird, but I'll allow it for one night."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where the Iron Giant stays overnight while Hogarth goes home and doesn't have a good night's sleep. He's woken up by his mom the moment he rolls into bed,
Mm-hmm.
because he's just been out all night.
Yep.
And it's here that he discovers that Agent Mansley has rented the room they're letting out.
Mm-hmm.
And now Agent Kent Mansley starts following him all day like, "Hey, when'd you first
Pestering
meet
him.
the giant? How big is it? What does it eat?" Just asking him all the questions. And Hogarth is refusing to answer because he's a government guy. If the government guys find out, it'll be like all the monster movies where they shoot the monster. I don't want them to blow up the monster. This
like
guy's
the
actually
monster.
kind of nice.
And he's the whole day just trying to ditch him until finally he slips some laxatives into a sundae that he's eating and gets away.
Meanwhile, at the junk shop / art studio, Dean is like, "Okay, Giant, you can't stay here. Stop eating my art. That's art. You can't understand what art is."
And
And
he's like, oh, wait a minute. And so he starts using the giant to
Yeah,
help
he's-
him build like enormous pieces of art.
out of the junkyard old bumpers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the Giant is growing on Dean as well, where it's
He's
like,
like, okay, yeah, he can stay here.
he's cool. We're chill.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some Hogarth comes back after ditching the agent Mansley, and they have a bit more time to hang out with the Giant. And so they're playing. He gets the Giant to like swing a car around like it's a spaceship flying around, and Hogarth pulls out a toy gun. He's like, I'm gonna shoot the big monster, and he's like, and this kind of triggers something in the Iron Giant where he sees the
About ready to blast
toy
him.
weapon pointed at him, and very nearly blasts Hogarth. It's like, oh, that's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is very not cool.
Yep. And they'd seen like a deer get shot by hunters in the woods or something, and Hogarth is explaining how death works to explaining how death works to Iron Giant, and he's like, that's a gun. Guns kill.
And guns kill are weapons. You don't,
Mm-hmm.
and that's bad.
Yep.
You don't want to be a bad robot. You don't want to be like the evil robot from this comic book. You want to be like Superman. You're like him. You came from outer space. You landed
can
on Earth
fly.
with no one understanding you, but you're very powerful and you're very gentle and you can be a hero if you want to. You're not a killer robot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's around this time that Agent Mansley discovers Hogarth's camera in the woods.
With
And
with a selfie of him and the giant on it. He's like, haha, I've got my evidence.
so he develops those photographs and sends them over to Washington because, I found my big lead.
He also like basically traps Hogarth in the house. He's like, hey, I know your secret. I found your camera.
You can't go running off to tell the Iron Giant because I'm going to keep an eye on you all night.
Mm-hmm. It turns into a staring contest. They both fall asleep. And when Mansley falls asleep, Hogarth sneaks out to warn Dean and the Giant that the government's coming and to hide the Giant.
So the government shows up at Dean's junkyard and like, oh, this better be good, Mansley. So they open the door to
The shed.
Dean's shed, and there's the Iron Giant with like a whole bunch of other parts on him. Like he's this art project, and he's being presented like, oh, this is my best work yet. It's a big commission. And
Yeah, this CEO was coming in. He wants to put this in his lobby, if you can believe that. And the government, the general, and all the soldiers all disappointed. It's like, this is what you got us out here for. And so the general like fires Mansley. He's like screams at him for making him bring all these government resources out here for nothing. And they all drive off, and Hogarth is evidently scot-free.
until because now the Giant is like, okay, I'm out now. He's hanging out with Hogarth for a bit, but then I think Mansley looks in like the rearview mirror and sees the Giant, up and around. It's like, oh, that little kid, that lovely child.
Yep.
And he's like, okay, I'm gonna turn this around and let's all start shooting at him because that's a great idea.
Yep.
And it was not a great idea.
No.
Because they in the conflict, there's several times where the Giant's about to turn weapon mode. Hogarth's like, no, stop, you're not a gun.
Mm-hmm.
We can do this, just run. Right? So he's running away with Hogarth.
Dean pieces together, wait a minute, the Giant only reacts violently as defensively.
Right.
And, Iron Giant's making a concerted effort to restrain himself from going all sicko mode.
That is until he gets knocked off his feet and drops Hogarth, who is knocked unconscious, but appears to the Giant to be dead.
And this causes something to snap in the Giant, and he just goes all ape crap.
He goes full on sicko mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the government's like, well, nothing can stop this thing. Let's call in the nukes. because nukes are obviously the best way to resolve this. We're going to nuke this tiny town in Maine.
Yeah, and the general's like, wait a minute, Mansley, are you crazy? Like, they have him on red alert, and then they discover, actually, no, Hogarth's okay, guys. He didn't kill the kid. Because that was what had caused the government to open fire on the kid.
Well, it was Agent Mansley lying to them that he had killed the kid.
Yeah.
When
and actually, the giant had like run into town to save a couple boys who were falling off the bell tower. So the townspeople were like, oh, this giant's a good guy.
Right.
And the government goes crazy. And yeah, that's how we got here.
Yeah.
And so Mansley steals the phone from the general and he's like, fire the nukes. And the general's like, you idiot. You said to fire at the giant's current position. We're next to the giant. We're going to get nuked.
And so the Giants headed off to where the launch came from to blow it up. Hogarth finally catches up. It's like, hey, I know you're not a gun. You're not a weapon. You can be Superman. You can be good. And so I'm gonna place myself between you and the boat, and until you snap out of it.
Mm-hmm. And he snaps out of it.
He does. He's like, oh, Hogarth. Oh crap!
He's
what
like,
have I done?
What have I done?
And then, so they all see the nuke, and it's flying up, and it's going to come down, and they're all
like, see, he's nice. He's not going to attack us. And it's like, well, we're all going to die if this nuke falls on us. And the giant's like, Hogarth, stay. I go.
And so he goes and does the Superman thing, where he catches the missile in midair and detonates it before it can come anywhere near enough to the town to do any damage.
Does the Iron Man thing, where he takes it up into space away from all the people.
Well, Superman was the guy who first started throwing all of his problems into space.
Fair enough.
So no.
And there's a lot of character parallels between Iron Giant and Superman.
That'll get broken down later. Anyway.
Much like Iron Giant.
Because the nuke explodes, and he
Yep.
blasts off into a million pieces, and Hogarth's the big sad, and Dean and his mom are like, oh, it's he was a hero, he was cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's a memorial to the giant in the town, and everything's okay. Mansley gets mega fired, and that's kind of
It's kind of implied that Dean and Hogarth's mom are sort of in a relationship now.
Yeah. And that's kind of where those characters end in this movie, where it's like
the government's like, hey, we recovered one piece of the giant. We figured you should have it. It's like this little screw.
A screw that earlier he had used to help. He had earlier helped put it back into his jaw when he broke the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But one day it activates like it's trying to get called back to reassemble. And so Hogarth opens his window and lets it roll off toward where the giant is reassembling, somewhere in what?
Like Iceland.
Like Iceland? Yeah.
Yes, that, as we all know, the barren wasteland of ice and snow.
Yes.
That is Iceland.
Yep.
Unlike Greenland, which is green.
The Iceland. It's the land of ice. Iceland.
But yeah, that's Iron Giant.
That is the Iron Giant.
So, what are some cool things we liked about the movie?
One of the cool things I liked about the movie is the kind of flip it does on the 1950s monster movie idea, because like the design of the giant himself is very like
Art Deco monster, like robot from space design.
Particularly when he goes all sicko mode and the dome happens and he's got all the lasers
and there's
even
like
the effects.
Those little arms are like War of the Worlds. Like
Right. And even like the death beams he fires, or the way they're animated, is very much in the style of those old monster comics kind of effects. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this is straight out of the 50s. I dig this.
Yep. The aesthetic
You know
is
what
very
I
1950s.
uncomfortably realized partway through our discussion of this?
Oh, what's that?
Hogarth is a boomer.
This is a boomer story. Okay, Hogarth.
I don't know if I'll ever recover. We kid. But he is a boomer.
He's a kid.
Yeah. He's a kid boomer.
He's a kid boomer, so is he even really a boomer yet?
Technically, yes. He was
Yeah,
a boomer when he
yes.
was born. That's how it's defined.
Boomerism is
Boomerism
Harrison-
manifested later.
yes.
He hasn't started wearing Hawaiian shirts and driving expensive cars yet in his old age. So
He hasn't had a midlife crisis yet.
Yep.
Well, there's something to put in the title.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a midlife crisis.
He
yet?
hasn't had. A,
No, the boomer aspect of it.
He hasn't had a Vietnam yet, so we're in good shape.
yeah.
But yeah, the 1950s aesthetic.
But like, it's one part like homage to the old monster movies, and then one part like
A twist.
a twist and a commentary on them, because they're also very much born out of that 50s through like 90s Cold War
Paranoia.
culture,
Yep.
where it's like, oh, you make stories about giant invaders because you're afraid of weapons of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's like you are not a like over the course of the show too. It's sort of like spells out. It's like one of his like main statements. Like you are not a gun. You are who you choose to be.
Yeah.
Self-determination, individualism. Yeah.
That type of stuff.
Yeah.
What else is good? It's also one of the few like. I suppose this was at the time when like Warner Brothers was still putting out animation.
When people in general are still putting out 2D animation.
Yeah, it's a really like seamless blend of 2D and 3D animation.
Right. There's a period.
For it being made in '99.
Yeah.
Right. There was a period in the early 2000s and even in the 90s when 3D was being introduced to 2D animation, where you could always immediately tell. And you can tell what's 3D here,
If you take a look at it.
but the
like,
way it's shaded, the way it's blended, fits with
it
a lot more
meshes really well.
seamlessly than other.
It's
Animations
just
of
very
the
well
era.
composited.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like you can tell what's CG in a live action movie too.
Well, and
Right,
if you
but
think
the
about
way
what
they're
they
layered
choose,
together is the
what they
important bit.
choose to 3D animate, like it's mostly the giant stuff
And that's
from
just
space
'cause-
and like technology, etc.
And it's mostly because he's got so many moving parts and he's so large and stuff where it's like, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. You want to have these very articulate technical robot bits going
It's
on.
kind of a cool creative choice too, like where it's like
Because
sort of foreign and
they're
different.
the parts that sort of inherently stand out of the aesthetic. So
Sure.
it kind of makes sense.
I suppose we're sort of jumping the gun a little bit here, but
Well, it's cool stuff. We're talking generally.
It's cool.
okay. What else do we like about it? Overall, I don't know. It's I saw it for the first time. I remember because back in my day when we watched stuff on VHS, I just kept seeing like the previews on the VHS for the Iron Giant. And I'm like, someday I'm gonna watch this movie. The first time I watched it was like during college, and I remember just like I was like, whoa, this is a way better movie than I was expecting it to be. And then I was like, you know what? I need the guys to see this show, and so we watched it last week, and it's like, yeah, it holds up. Pretty well put together movie.
Yeah, I had heard about it. It was one of those hidden gems, cult classics from the early 2000s, late
Yep.
90s sort of a thing.
Enough of a cult classic to be included in Ready Player One, apparently.
Right. And also now multiverses. Have you seen any
Iron Giant stuff? No, I haven't seen.
Well,
I've seen
have
like a little bit. I saw Super Saiyan Shaggy, but that's about it.
Right. But there's that Warner Bros. Smash Bros. Ripoff. Iron Giant is also going to be in that, which is fun.
Nice.
Anyway. So, but it's funny. I don't. You mentioned like you watched a bunch of previews for him on VHS, and I'm like, there were just eras where you bought like VHSs from the same company during a brief time where they all had the exact same trailers on them.
Yep.
And like, I suppose they still do previews on DVDs, but it's
Coming
not
soon to Disney DVD.
with like the two chords and the
Yeah.
blue and yellow light.
Like everyone has access to trailers just like that nowadays. So
Yeah.
Right, so it's a different experience now. Kids these days, they'll never know.
These days.
They'll never know that they have to rewind a movie a VHS, but they don't want to rewind it all the way back, so they have to fast forward through the previews again.
And maybe this is kind of a more on the beauty end, but like there's a lot of voice actors like beyond Jennifer Aniston. There aren't a whole lot of like voice actors in the show or in the movie that like with names you'd really recognize necessarily, but like all the performances were like
As it
quite
ought
good.
to be.
Right. I feel
Yeah.
like the
Voice acting should not be done by, typical method actors unless they know what they're doing, and most of the time they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that really got its start in with the genie in Aladdin being Robin Williams, which
Yep.
his voice was fantastic for the role, so it's like a good cast.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, star power can bring people to animated films,
Huh.
and
This is all we will ever do from here forever. Anyway, anything else before we get into the analysis? We good?
cool stuff.
Truth. What are some truths we can find in Iron Giant?
I am not a gun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to choose to be what you to like give in to your natural inclinations.
Yep.
Because those are generally speaking like, concupiscence and all that. So we have a tendency to do bad thing
Mm-hmm.
because of sin. But we can also choose to rise above that.
Yeah.
Because we are not defined by the bad things we are capable of.
Yep. So less in a self-deterministic sense and more of a fully realizing.
That's the way it comes across, and it's probably intended, but I'm
Yep.
choosing to interpret it in a more Catholic light.
Correct. Which is what we do here in the podcast.
Which, I mean, the self-determinism way is just without...
It's sort of
It's
represented
all you can really
in-
do without God.
It's kind of represented in Dean's character too, I suppose, where he's got his junkyard business and whatever, but he's kind of doing his own thing and being thinking outside the box and kind of a beatnik, all that stuff.
But also, well, I suppose that's more goodness. But like
Mm-hmm.
he's a guy who can see under the surface, see beyond appearances,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where he's accepting of the giant because he has the ability to, after meeting him and getting to know him a little bit, it's like, oh, you're not the monster you appear to be. There's more to you underneath the surface. And him being this weird artist guy who draws art out of discarded scrap metal.
Yeah,
It's like
I suppose that's another theme, like as far as like the 1950s are concerned, as an era where people were definitely grappling with that whole, not judging things by their appearance.
right.
Because like not viewing the other unknown other as some sort of threat, but as something with which they might have in common. Yeah.
Because, yeah, as we've established earlier, alien invasion films are often about our strained relationships with an unknown other that we have difficulty communicating or seeing eye to eye with,
Yep.
be it a language barrier or literally them being 50 feet tall.
Yep. Metal man eating metal objects and stuff. Any other truths we can talk about? Goodness. Hogarth is good.
Yes, he's a very caring young boy,
Compassionate, yeah.
very compassionate.
Yeah, he likes to take in
He's
animals.
also the mayor of downtown Coolsville.
Population
us. Like I told you, I'm hip.
proceeds to run his mouth off while high on coffee.
High on espresso, yeah.
Espresso.
Which I have a bone to pick with how they animated that, because he just dumps the grounds into the top of the pot,
That is
which
not
would be the
espresso.
effectively like dumping grounds into a coffee pot as we know them now.
Yep.
You're just like dumping the coffee where the coffee the
I
brewed
wonder
coffee
how
goes.
if specialty made like espresso machines existed to the general public at that point. That I do
No,
not
they
know.
did not. They did exist. Like the electric pressurized ones were, invented in the 30s,
Mm-hmm.
but they were not commercially available.
So, yeah, Hogarth's a very good character, though.
Yep.
As is Dean.
Yep. And they both kind of leave a very good impression on the giant, who it's sort of implied that he's like sort of been hurtled to Earth from some alien war he was a part of.
Right. The dent on his head was what was preventing him
Some
from
sort of
immediately
amnesia.
going sicko mode, as it would be interpreted based on the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's through his relationship and learning from Hogarth, and
He's
also
like, hey,
Dean.
you can be like Superman. You can use your power to help others and save people.
Because there's that story parallel there where
Mm-hmm.
Superman. It's interesting how there's the two 1950s style comic books he shows them. There's Superman, then there's the Evil Robots comic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where one is the robot from outer space being shunned by the outside and blowing everybody up, and the other is Superman, who he's Superman, you know? He crashes onto Earth, and despite everything that happens on Earth, he remains good. He's the Jesus figure.
Mm-hmm. And Giant manages to sacrifice himself and save the town,
Yeah.
like Superman.
Also, Hogarth's mom is a very fantastic, concerned mom character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can tell she's, pulled from all directions trying to hold down a good life for this kid and just having difficulty doing it because it's a single mom in the 1950s.
Yep.
So,
And still allows Hogarth to have what appears to be a pretty happy childhood. So yeah, lots of the theme of like self-sacrifice here.
yeah.
Any other elements of goodness? Beauty. 2D animated movie. Very well animated movie, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Although it was a little weird, like some characters have like pupils on their eyes, some people just have irises, but the characters, like the character design is really good. Like the whole aesthetic blends pretty well.
It honestly has this 90s animation vibe that we don't get anymore.
Yeah.
Like, not just in
You
just
get a
because-
very wholesome vibe from this movie, which is not a very critical way of critical thinking way of putting it, but there's just something about the movie where it's like it's got those comfy vibes, like but yeah, that aesthetic is very refreshing.
Yeah. And the soundtrack, the score was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Then also they did use a couple period specific like songs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they had some good use of both like original score and period music to set the tone.
Mm-hmm. Also, like the backgrounds and everything, like all the matte paintings and things like that were pretty cool. Like capturing, New England in the late fall and like early winter, that type of thing. And also like strangely historically accurate, like jets and stuff in the movie.
Well,
I was like, this is a detail that literally nobody else cares about, but I appreciate this.
and it's that attention to detail that just goes the extra mile. It's very fun.
Yeah. Like, and we were talking earlier about like Hogarth's dad. Like at one point, like midway through the movie, you see a picture of a pilot on his dresser in his room or something. He's like, he wore, like, that was where the light bulb clicked in my head. Wait, he wears a flight jacket and a helmet, which are left over from his dad. So probably his dad died in a war.
So there's some
like that.
really kind of fantastic subtlety to the movie.
Because some movies would, like, some people who would write that would attempt to be like, go through and like actively explain that. Like, this is why they're in this situation. But like, he's got a single mom. The dad's not in the picture, but there's little effects of him around the house. You can piece that together without having to explicitly state it.
It's not important to the story, really.
Right.
None
but
of
it's
the
a cool,
characters.
like, extra touch.
It just makes it feel real.
Yep.
Right? It's like real people don't stop and explain to you the plot of how they're
Like every single time they meet some new person, it's like, and my father died when I was a baby. Like, it's all that stuff.
It's like, no, he's living with his mom. That's all people know, and
that's efficient writing for you.
Yeah, it's really well put together like that.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned like the blending of like the 3D and the 2D animation in like ways that make sense, and it's pretty well done. Anything to add to that, Riley?
Nope.
All right. Unity. What brings everything together in Iron Giant?
The 50s.
Yeah.
because
50s.
Because 50s.
Well, actually, this is less determined by that.
Yeah.
Actually, no, never mind. It kind of is.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of not a meditation maybe, but something similar to that. I'm trying to
A
think.
reflection.
A reflection on like the zeitgeist of the 50s.
Yes, very much. And like, I believe it might actually be based on a book, which was
Yeah.
Cold War era
Mm-hmm.
story that was making commentary on the suspicion of the era, right?
Yep.
And so the giant himself and how he chooses to respond to the aggression that the military shows to him, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of the central thing. Where it's like,
Yeah, it's sort of the message of the movie is like, if you respond to, the unknown other with like aggression and fear, you're only going to make things infinitely worse.
violence begets violence.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is for somebody to do something to break that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
To
And with Hogarth's help, that's what Iron Giant is able to do.
exactly.
That is what Vin Diesel is able to do in his audition for Groot.
He says
This
significantly more words in this than
He
Guardians
does.
of the Galaxy, though.
He does, yeah. So I guess you could say he was overqualified, and which is a doozy of a thing to say for Vin Diesel. But,
Vin Diesel was the celebrity voice actor in this movie.
He was.
That's what
he
it
was. I suppose like Jennifer Aniston was pretty well known with Friends at the time, but not like a movie actress.
Yeah.
Per se, but. If there's nothing else to go over, I think should we go ahead and wrap this up?
Probably a good idea. You've got a movie in 25 minutes.
I do,
so-
yeah. I should probably get going. Alrighty, well, thanks for listening to The Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And leave a rating to let us know what you think of the show. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Pal Papists. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.